see white lies dancing between the lines. She's an atheist. Carousels in her mind, spinning all in her eyes. She's an atheist.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Freethought Radio Hour on WOZO Radio 103.9 LPFM here in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're recording this on Sunday morning, October 16th, 2022. I'm Larry Rhodes, or Doubter 5, and as usual, we have our co-host, Wombat, on the line with us. Hello, Wombat.
Isn't it amazing that we live in a universe where I'm the co-host to this show? Isn't that proof that God exists?
Well, some God, maybe. We don't know which.
It's an evil God.
Oh, no. And today's guests are Dread Pirate Higgs from Western Canada. Hello. And John Richards from England. Welcome, welcome.
How the devil are you?
Doing well, thank you. Digital Freethought Radio Hour is a talk radio show about atheism, free thought, rational thought, humanism, and the sciences. And conversely, we'll also talk about religion, religious faiths, gods, holy books, and superstition. And if you get the feeling that you're the only non-believer in your town, well, you're just not, especially if you live in Knoxville. Here in Knoxville, in the middle of the Bible Belt, we have a group of over 1,000 of us. It's called the Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, and we'll tell you more about that group after the mid-show break. Wombat, what's our topic today?
Healing by faith alone. And it's going to be an impressive topic today, one where we get a lot of stuff off of our chest. But what about stuff in our stomach? Maybe we can fill up on some noodly goodness, and who better to lead us on a weekly invocation by our own Dread Pirate Higgs.
Indeed. I'm called to invoke the power of the true creator of the universe, the drunken tolerator of all lesser and more recent gods, the maintainer of gravity here on Earth. May the great flying spaghetti monster arouse himself from his stupor and let his noodly appendages ground each of us in our seats.
Ramen. Guys, I wanted to catch up. Sorry for the late start. Some background talk. I think I mistook which hour we started at, but I think we're anticipating a daylight savings time change. So maybe I just got a little too excited for that. But guys, I do want to catch up on you. I want to catch up on you here and now. Dread, how you been?
Oh, not too bad. I've been busy working, so that's why I wasn't able to make it last week. I was out on a set in a fairly remote area. So yeah. And I was out of data, as it turned out.
You were on a what?
I was on a set.
Oh,
Like a film set.
okay. But you said you were on a blank data on a data.
I was out of data on my phone.
Oh, you're out of data.
On this
Yeah,
phone.
yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay,
I was out of data.
I thought you said
But,
you were on a date. And
Well, my wife probably wouldn't appreciate that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
there's a couple interesting news items from my neck of the woods.
Sure.
I did, I'd gotten an FOI request, I think I had mentioned, from ICBC, our insurance corporation, the one I'm having this battle with.
Sure.
And they sent 691 pages of fully redacted emails. And so I sent a complaint to the Office of the Freedom of Information Officer here in BC, and they've decided to take it on. And so
Nice.
they've demanded ICBC provide the unsevered documents in full within 15 days. So it's already coming up now.
Good.
And then they'll have an officer assigned to it to go through those documents and see what can be provided, because certainly the full redaction of every email seems a little excessive,
Right.
and certainly is not in the spirit of freedom of information.
No,
request,
not at
right?
all.
Or in the spirit of saving black ink, I would have thought.
There you go. It takes up a lot of toner. And also on the other front, with my security license, I have heard back from the Office of the Ombudsman, who is reviewing my file to hopefully come to it, because they have the power to recommend that it is not in the mandate of any government agency to review the veracity of a person's religious belief.
Good.
and this, of course, is already demonstrated in other jurisdictions. So it's
And
just
it
a
should
matter
be.
of bringing BC up to speed. So it's actually working on two fronts here. If I can get the ombudsman to make the recommendation to the Ministry of Justice and get my that security license with my tricorn on, then it just becomes a simple matter of it moving over to ICBC to do the same thing. So yeah,
Right.
so that's what I'm up to.
Dred, I can't tell you how deeply I admire the work that you're putting in. In my head, it's an evil in an atheist secular term. It's an evil when dogma like this spreads without any sort of resistance or question to it.
Yeah.
And in my head, it's like it's not the people who perpetrate the dogma that should be at fault. It's the ones who know it's bad but don't say anything.
Exactly.
Because that's what
Right.
allows the culture to change. Because
Yep.
it only takes one crazy person to change. I mean, for a bunch of quiet listeners to change a culture, but
Yeah.
for you to stand up and make a voice about this is what I hope more people would take example from. We need more leaders.
Well, I appreciate that. And I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I despair over this battle I've been fighting since 2016, and almost entirely on my own.
Yeah.
It's and so thank you. I really appreciate the kind words.
I really don't want to make you feel like you aren't on your own. You're definitely doing most of the legwork, but you definitely have our support. And
Right on.
Absolutely. Yeah. You are the spokesman for the silent majority.
right.
There you go.
And maybe we can talk more about that despair, because it is something that you can feel, especially when you talk to like people who are like so deep in their indoctrination, particularly when it comes to like things that you just know aren't true, that you can
Right.
demonstrate are true, but they want to believe it's true and are making concessions to believe that. But before we get into it, John Richards, I want to know about you and your quest overseas. When will that tugboat make it to the other side of the screen? What is going on with the King of England? Tell me everything that you know. We'll talk about it maybe more today in again.
Well, I don't know how political you want to get, but we've got a puppet for a prime minister at the moment, and
Okay.
the country is being run by the newly appointed, and I mean newly yesterday, Chancellor of the Exchequer. So the likelihood is that we'll have yet another prime minister in a very short time, honestly. But I wanted to say that I'm never out of data because my contract is unlimited. However, this doesn't mean unlimited dates, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay.
You got to separate the two. You see, there's
three.
data.
There's data, there's
There's
dates, and there's like going out with people. And then there's also calendar dates too. So it's a weird cinnamon. What are you gonna
And
do?
if you don't like dates, you can have figs.
It's true. It's true.
Anyway,
Way
to
easier
tell you
to
what I personally have been up to,
Hmm.
last night we had a very good Freethought hour, and it was only because our guest didn't turn up. She phoned in sick. Poor lady, she's got upper respiratory infection. She can't speak at the moment, so that did with her prospects of being our guest. So Tercio and I flew by the seat of our pants
Nice.
and addressed some of the misconceptions that people have with evolution. It was fun. You should
Good.
watch it.
Okay, absolutely. Let's get this on. Let's get on the show. I'm actually going to check that out because I was talking about evolution earlier this week. Larry.
Well, I mentioned the fact that only the previous Sunday you and I had talked about idiotic design, which was very relevant.
Very cool. So it could be like a follow-up to the show. Awesome.
Yeah.
Larry, give me
Yeah.
an update on what you're doing. Are you trolling on the internet right now? Tell me what's going on.
No, Within Reason came up to visit Sheila and I yesterday, and we went out to lunch, and it was all good. And she visited for a while, and I thought she was going to join us on the show today, but she's not here, and maybe she got caught in the time change or something too. So I'm
Sure.
texting her to say, "Hey, we're on."
Sure.
Yeah.
But how you been?
Oh, fine. Boring life. Work day, play games in the evening, and I didn't ride my motorcycle or anything this week, so kind of boring.
Just video
Not
games,
much
VR,
going on.
motorcycling. Not that much going on. Just the life of a wonderful retiree having fun and still working at the same time. Great.
Yep.
So
But cool.
I was working in my job. Speaking of work, and I was working in my job. I work with a lot of scientists. One in particular I know knows that I'm an atheist and that he's a Christian. And we were talking about he wanted to see a world map because he wanted to know where my family is from. And I told I have some family from St. Thomas. He's just like, where's that? The Bahamas? I'm like, no, it's a little more south. And I pulled up a picture of the globe. And he's like, oh, look at that. That's so cool. And you said your family came from here and here. I can tell because the facial features are similar to like these people who I've seen in like Africa and maybe even a little bit in India. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I'm my head, I'm like, where is this going? But in his head, he's like, I just wanted to explain, like, you know, when the reason why people share similar facial structures and skin color is largely just geographical, because you started out with human beings in Africa, they spread out, and the closer they stayed at the equator, the more their skin maintained melanin. And I was like, oh, this is really fancy for a Christian to tell me this. Because one, I already knew it, but like two, I'm just waiting for like the balls to drop. Because like when does it begin to overlap with the Christian thing? You guys know what I'm talking about. Every atheist has this moment.
Yeah.
And so he's just like, you know, the humans spread out, and the ones who are on the north, they evolutionarily stayed up. I'm like, oh, so you believe in evolution? It's like, yeah. Of course I do. Of course I do. I'm a scientist. It's like, okay, he is also a Christian too. And I'm like, you believe humans evolved? And he's like, yes, of course. And I'm like, from a non-human species? And he's like, yes, of course. And I'm like, this is very interesting. And he's even showing me, like, you know, I even think tectonic plates are a thing. Like, look at India and how it's shaped, and then look at like Africa, and you can see how they like originally used to be together. And you can measure the tectonic plates. You can see them on a satellite. He's just like, okay, so you think tectonic plates are a thing? Human evolution.
And the age of the earth is old.
Yeah, and the age of the earth isn't like under 10,000 years. I'm like, oh, this is very interesting, because a lot of Christians, I said this, a lot of Christians don't believe that. And he's like, well, listen,
it directly contradicts the Bible. So
correct, right? But I told him a lot of Christians don't believe it. He's like, well, you know, a lot of Christians say a lot of different things, but I will never let my religious beliefs interfere with reality, because I see reality as more important. And I'm like, so even if the Bible said that Adam and Eve were the first two people, and that doesn't comply to the scientific understanding of like how, you know, humans evolved in Africa and then went through, you know, different cultures and different geographic locations, like, you're fine with that contrasting? He's like, yeah, of course, that's definitely a contrast. I'm like, in which case the Bible would be wrong? He's like, yeah, the Bible's wrong there. I'm like, well, then why do you believe in a God, right?
And particularly that religion.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Larry. Go ahead.
Well, I was saying, he says, my religion is one thing and reality is something else. Well, right then, he just got through saying that his religion is not based on reality.
It's not based on reality. Right.
But is he not making the connection?
Oh, there's a minefield. There's a minefield.
That's a pretty serious sign of cognitive dissonance.
Yes. Essentially what we're talking about here is cognitive dissonance, and of course, you know, I love poking at that. I shouldn't have poked at it at like, you know, 4 o'clock on a Friday.
You're a pokeyman.
I want to know.
I would have said, can I have it in writing that your religion is unreal?
Very good, yeah.
Nothing, or may I quote you on that? Yeah.
Yes. So basically, I thought I had like a perfect example of like a guy who just needed like 2 seconds to maybe a minute to think about everything he just said, to realize maybe I don't have as much of a good reason to believe in this God. So I'm like, well, why do you believe in a God? I just want to at least know. I know which God he's talking about, but why do you believe in a God? Open topic. I like to, when I do these questionings, I don't like to go through a flow chart. I really want the person to expound on the belief and give me like their best reasoning without
in their own words,
right? In their own words. So why do you believe in a God? And it started with, that's such a great question, Ty. Listen, this is really important to me. I had so many different experiences that led to this, and I'm like, okay, so personal experiences, that's great. Tell me about like the best one. He's like, I have the best one for you. Listen, I had a friend, and he's Indian. I had a friend, and I bring that up because culturally there are a lot of Hindus.
Is he Indian or red Indian?
I don't know how to respond to that, but he is from India, and he said, listen, I had a friend who brought me to a church, and for the first time. And what was amazing was I was in the pews, and the pastor comes up on the pews, and he looks around, and guess what he did? He looked straight at me, and he said, I know what your name is. And he knew my name, and I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, And then what? Me. I'm like, and then what? He's like, well, no, I'm just saying that's one of the experiences I had. And I'm like, how did you go from that to a God exists?
And
In my head,
God.
in my mouth and my head, I exclaimed that out. And I apologize probably now retroactively, because I realized that could have like started a series of events where like my volume started going up. But I was just so shocked that this man who is a scientist, a PhD, fell for essentially just a, what could have essentially just been a parlor trick.
Yeah, it's a Peter Popoff trick, right?
Right.
Yeah. Of just like, oh, pointed at a guy, knows his name. It's like, you went from that to a God exists? Like, well, how did he know my name? He knew where I worked. Go ahead, John. I didn't even want to go into that. But afterwards, he's like, I saw this man do something also incredible. It's like, I was trying to explain to him, like, maybe he was a time traveler. Maybe maybe he was a sorcerer. Maybe he was a telepath. Like, why did you jump to God? And which in my head is far more incredible than a guy who has a time machine or can read people's minds.
At least that would be natural.
Right. Or an alien. Like, you went to the most extreme possible case, a God existing. And as your answer, like, how did you not know it was any of these things, or just a trick that you fell for, like a little electronic device? He's like, listen, I'll tell you why. Because I saw the most incredible thing happen. During that same presentation, he brought up a person who was sick, and he touched that person. And let me tell you something. He said this person was seen by 5 doctors who all said the same thing. This person couldn't be healed. He touched this person and he healed that person in the name of Jesus. And that's one of the reasons why I believe. And in my head, I'm like, why do
scientists, especially scientists,
why do scientists of all people fall for stuff like this? And I wanted to talk about faith healing and personal experiences today, and why that could be so motivating for someone to believe in something they already potentially want to be true. Larry, what do you think?
Well, when people bring that to me, I've got a friend who I've got 2 or 3 friends that I've had pretty much the same conversation with them. And I said, what convinced you that God is real? Oh, well, I had this intestinal cancer, and after I prayed, it went away. And I keep wanting to scream at him like you did your friend, but this different note. Why did you have intestinal cancer if God loves you and is looking out for you and trying to protect you? Why do you have cancer in the first place? Where was God when you were getting that cancer? But nobody seems to consider that.
There's a darker turn to that too, in that, why did you get healed? Why did God choose you to be healed of cancer? And what about the people who do believe in God who weren't healed?
Right.
Or the many people who die all the time, who could have been saved or would change their mind if they were miraculously healed, but just were died anyway. Why is God picking and choosing certain people and not others?
Yeah, that's a familiar thing in the aftermath of plane crashes, where the survivors in an otherwise deadly air crash are praising God. Say, well, God saved me for some special purpose. It's like, what?
And what kills me is how they blame the victim so many times. You were talking about, why did you get healed when this other person didn't get healed? Well, I must have prayed more. I must have been more pious. I went to church more. So they're putting the blame for it on the victim who died from it.
Right. And it's just a sad thing, because the people who die from things like this, plane crashes or cancer, can't speak for themselves. And so it only bolsters the narrative of the ones who survive, who do say, well, God saved me. You know what's weird? It's the boxer effect. If you guys haven't noticed it, whenever there's 2 men boxing and they both have like Jesus crosses tattooed on their arm, right? They got crosses and the beads and everything like that. One knocks out the other one viciously. And then they go in interviews like, what would you like to say? I just want to thank God for this victory. I just really want to thank him. It's like, yeah, but like if the other guy won and he knocked you out, he'd be doing the same thing too. A Christian got knocked out at the end of the day. Like, what makes you, and what no one ever blames God in their conciliatory interviews. So it just seems like, what's going on there? John Richard, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, sure. Well, I wanted to, because what you've reported there, the man having his name recognized, the other man, the woman having her broken leg or bent leg straightened or whatever it was. Those are examples of anecdotes. And I one of my one of my contacts, I'd like to call her a friend, is Professor Sophie Scott, who's just been given a CBE by, I think, the new king. And we saw a video on, must have been Twitter, of a pair of parrots, because she's the lead of the Department of Neuroscience at University College London. And we saw this video on Twitter that has got a pair of parrots, and they're talking parrots, and they've learned to insult people. So people go by and they get called names by these parrots, but the clincher is the parrots then laugh together. So it looks very realistic, as though they are behaving intelligently. But of course, that's just behavior that they've copied.
Sure.
They've seen us insulting people and laughing together, and they've picked up on it. So I showed this to Professor Sophie Scott, and she said, "That's a nice story." And I could tell from the way she'd written it that the accent was on the story, because it's not evidence. It's not evidence. Right. So I shared it with another.
It's anecdote. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. You get the point.
Go ahead, Larry.
No, I was talking about your scientific friend. If he had seen that type of thing at a magician show, if he'd gone into a venue where there was a magician on stage and he was doing all kinds of miraculous stuff, he would think it was a trick. But you put the same trick in a church, and the person is just blown away by the power of God.
Because they're willing to suspend this, because they want what the pastor says to be true. Like in my head,
it's also a crowd thing, when the crowd moves,
effervescence.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to highlight. Oh, go ahead, Dred.
I was just going to say that not all people are necessarily taken in by the faith aspect of magical healing. Mm-hmm. My dad, for instance, is an atheist. Pretty staunch about it. Nevertheless, he takes apple cider vinegar every morning, because he thinks it has this special property that, it's a cure-all. And again, it's just magical thinking. And, I've sat down and we've done, the Socratic examination thing, and he comes to the realization that it's probably all in his head, but he still does it.
Well, maybe he likes it.
I don't know. There's some weird comfort he derives from it.
Maybe he's a vinegaraholic. Is that the right way to say it? Acetaholic.
He used to be an alcoholic. Now he's a vinegaraholic.
Yeah. Maybe it's still, you don't see any elephants around me now type of thing.
I'm going to have to bring that up. I'm going to say, you're a vinegaraholic.
There you go. Acetaholic.
I just traded one poison for another.
Yeah.
Are you sure it's vinegar in that bottle and not the predecessor?
Okay. I wanted to make a point, because Larry and both Dred, you were saying like a magic trick is just when it's put into a church setting, people are more willing to believe it. But the weird thing about a magic trick is that it's designed such that the people who see the trick, when they explain what happened, it's never how it happened. The narrative of explaining a magic trick from someone who doesn't know the mechanics behind it is always far more fantastical than the actual practice of doing the trick. For example, I saw a guy shuffle a whole deck of cards, shuffled it again, cut the deck, showed me like all the cards were randomly displayed, shuffled it one more time, and then from the top, he pulled out 4 aces. I don't know how he did that. That was amazing. Like, that is not what that guy did. That guy probably did a very sophisticated maneuver of card trickery, sleight of hand, that you just didn't catch. That's far more boring once you know how the trick is actually done. Yeah. But in retelling the narrative, it's far more fantastic, because it makes this guy seem like he's supernatural or has some capability of controlling probability. Yeah. That is inherently what a trick is. It's when you can enjoy it for a piece of entertainment, it's fantastic. But when you take it from a magical setting, which you in your head is like, these are just card tricks, to a church setting where this is actually things that happen, and we all in this group believe that this is happening, and this is reality, and this actually does exist, but it's the same clever sleight of hand or sleight of words. That is now, in my head, a dishonest act, but it could be done genuinely by people who genuinely believe it, or who think they're doing a good thing by purporting this narrative. Dred, what do you think?
I was going to say that it's interesting in some cases where a person's been shown a magic trick, that they will not believe the person who did it, that it was a trick. They'll say, no, it can't be a trick. That's magic. That's real magic. You just
I would
did
have
real
seen
magic.
it.
And they will
Yeah.
they will just not let it go. They will not allow themselves to feel like they've been deceived. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They will say, no, you just did real magic. You're lying to me by saying it's a trick.
Sure.
Like
I
I've
just
seen,
really want to believe in magic.
yeah, they want to believe in
Apparently.
magic.
They want to believe. And that's such a good point, because I did bring this up to my friend and I said, listen, if there was a sorcerer and we brought you to him and like an audience, and he knew who your name was, and he said, I know what your name is. I know what your profession is. You can interview me afterwards. I'll happily talk to you. I figured out all these things about you, your birthday, everything that I couldn't have possibly known otherwise. Using sorcery, I'm a sorcerer. I asked him, would you believe in sorcery then? And he said, no. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. What if, and previously the pastor did a faith healing event and that really impressed him. I said, what if we brought back another pastor who believed in Vishnu or Buddha or Allah, and said, listen, I'm going to take this guy who has half an arm, I'm going to touch him, and then his arm is going to grow back. And he does that, and we see that, and we can interview him and hold him afterwards. Would you believe in those other guys? He's like, no, Ty. No, you're not understanding. And then he tried to repeat his pastor story to me again. It's just like,
Right.
I don't want to hear,
No.
I understand the mechanics. I'm trying to get the methodology.
That doesn't even mention the leap of logic.
Right.
It's one thing to say, okay, this person miraculously or magically or sleight of handly changed this person's leg.
Yes.
But automatically they take the leap to it was a god, and two, it was another leap to it was this particular god. And they don't recognize that there's any leap in there at all. We really need to take a break. Station identification. But go ahead.
Can I just say, for that reason, when talking about gods to be believers, I always use the word "your" in front. I always say "your God" to make the point that there's other ones.
Good point. Right. And so stay tuned for the second half of the Digital Freethought Radio Hour. We're on WOZO Radio, 103.9 LP/FM here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And where Tennessee just beat Alabama, by the way, for the first time in a couple of decades. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back to the second half of the Digital Freethought Radio Hour. I'm Doubter 5, and we're on WOZO Radio, 103.9 LP/FM here in Knoxville, Tennessee. Let's take a moment to talk about the Atheist Society of Knoxville. ASK was founded in 2002. We're in our 20th year and have over 1,000 members. We have weekly in-person meetings every Tuesday night or evening at Knoxville's Old City at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria. We also have weekly Zoom meetings on Tuesday evening too, start about 6 o'clock. The ones at Barley's, the in-person meeting starts around 5:30. So if you'd like to join us, just come on down to Barley's and join us. Or if you'd like to join the Zoom meeting, email us at askanatheist@knoxvilleatheist.org or letschatse@gmail.com. By the way, if you don't live in Knoxville, you should still go to Meetup and search for an atheist group in your town. Don't find one? Start one. Right. Wombat, where do we want to pick up?
I wanted to get back to this point of my Christian scientist friend, who is both a scientist and a Christian, has this immaculate cognitive dissonance. And we're talking to him about why he believed in God. And he said, it was because I went to a place where a pastor knew my name without me ever telling him. And he did some faith healing. And I said, okay, well, I think we can talk about the two combined, because that's largely just a personal experience that you had that was very vivid for you. And I said, what if we brought you to a sorcerer who knew your name and could heal people? Grow back an arm from the elbow that we can chop it off and you can touch a person and it grows back in. Would you believe in sorcery then? He's like, no, because I know that's just a trick. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. What if we had a Muslim or a Islam representative who touched a person and grew back his arm? It's like, Ty, I'm not going to believe it if it's a person who represents Islam or Buddhism or anything like that. And I said, well, what if there's another Christian? What if we got another Christian there? It was like, no, because I don't care about the pastor. I care about Jesus Christ. And I only care if people are doing it in the name of Jesus Christ. And I said, okay, fine. What if we got back, I brought back a guy who claimed to be Jesus Christ, and we can interview him afterwards, and we can hold him and we can touch him, and we can cut off a person's arm, and he can be like, I'm Jesus Christ, I'm going to touch this guy. And the arm miraculously grows back in front of our eyes, and he says he's Jesus, and he's willing to talk to us afterwards. Would you believe it? Would you believe that guy was at least Jesus Christ then? He's like, no, of course I wouldn't. I'm like, that's very bizarre. So then what makes you believe that Jesus ever healed anybody? He's like, because it was in the Bible. And I was like, so because someone said it in the Bible, you believe it? But if we have the opportunity to actually bring someone from the Bible here to the present, and you can talk to them, touch them, hold them, and see the things for yourself, the claims that were made in the Bible, you can see it for yourself and test it and interview afterwards, you wouldn't believe it then. It's like, no. And I'm like, then why do you believe it when it's in the Bible? And I think that was largely when the conversation started going back into the...
Well, I can imagine, because weren't you saying he was at the same time saying, well, the Bible's wrong about this and wrong about that?
Yes!
Wrong about that. How do you figure out which is which?
When you have a book that you already know can be wrong about certain things, why do you believe it on other claims?
Right.
What's your test to know which one's true and not?
What's the test?
And
I wanted to bring up Lo Ma here. I posted this in chat. Lo Ma said it's easy to reverse that healing story. My friend went to 5 faith healers who said they couldn't be healed, and then went to an oncologist.
Yeah,
and was subsequently healed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, John Richards, go ahead.
So I'd like to ask your friend what his criteria are. How does he know what is a reliable source of information if his source of information is unreliable? He's recognized that his Bible doesn't work. So,
and it's the sort of thing where when you have a Christian who feels like they're on the ropes and they start doing the word soup, I'm just going to keep saying things because it doesn't have to make sense, because most people never correct me when I talk about God in this way. So as long as I just keep talking, I'm good. I hate when I have to sit through that, especially when I'm not doing it in an adversarial sense. I'm having this conversation in their benefit to try to make them realize that there are standards for believing things. And if it's in your interest to believe in this true thing that you think is the most important true thing in your life, that you should also hold it to the same criteria that you hold to anything else. And if you don't hold it, you might potentially lead yourself on the path where you're believing in something that you think is true that may not actually be true. And I'm not the one saying that it's not true. I'm the one saying you're not having a standard that's equivalent between the things that we agree are scientifically testable to come to a certain conclusion, like the color of people's skin and why they have more melanin than others, or the movement of tectonic plates in the continents, or how humans evolved from a non-human species. Each time I was like, how do you know that? Well, scientific evidence. Well, how do you know about scientific evidence? How do you know scientific evidence? Well, then what about the God belief? Well, once upon a time, my friend took me to a cool place, and I saw, and listen, Ty, listen, I know you're not going to believe this, but it's like, why do you have a different standard? That's the most important thing that you believe in. Come on. Yeah. And so, I was really, really sad by that. And then, listen, I keep remembering, but we got things to talk about. But listen, one of the things that really irked me was the fact that he said, listen, I believe in the faith healing because he brought up a person who 5 doctors could not resolve this foot crooked.
Well, how does he know that? Did he interview the doctors?
Yes. No, he did. He did. He believed it because the pastor told him that.
Right.
But listen,
it's
when someone says, you know how the Bible's true? Because you have 4 different people talking about the same story. And like in my head, that's just one big claim. And all they did was fracture it. Like some of those people couldn't even spell as well as they were, and were not literate. All right. Anyway, not to get too much in the soup. Not to get too much.
I've been doing some, as you know, I like doing taking down of Frank Turek. I've been doing Frank Turek debunking, and one recently dealt with that very subject. How can you justify believing in the Gospels? And he said that if we expect a historical document to be reliable, it needs to accurately describe the details of the surrounding culture, people, places, and public practices. So I did a takedown of him and pointed out that this could also apply to Spider-Man,
Yes.
Harry Potter, the Dickens story of Great Expectations, because
Or
they've all
every
got
other holy book.
that they've all got well-described locations in there, but
Right.
there's no evidence for any event.
Right. And the thing is, just because you have a book that 4 people agree on, if you have 4 people that agree something, even in the same room, doesn't make it a fact. That's not a
right,
good
absolutely.
standard to determine if true things are true or things are actually false. Just having 4 people agree on it or 5 people agree on it. And he looked me in the eye and he's just like, but 5 doctors all said, it's like, even if that was true, even if it was true that 5 doctors agree that this lady's legs were crooked and couldn't be healed by any sort of
doctors
modern
of what?
medicine.
A doctor of English, a doctor of Scientology, what, you know?
Yeah, it's like 5
Religious studies.
There have been
Yeah, 5
historical
doctors of religious studies.
history has shown us that 5 people can be wrong about something all the time, including evolution. How many people were argumentative against Charles Darwin when he was like, I actually think
Absolutely.
humans are just a product of evolution, like cows or birds or pigeons or any other animal
Yeah.
species? How many doctors disagreed that you shouldn't wash your hands when you try to give birth to people because germs aren't a real thing, because they didn't understand germ theory back in the day? And it goes into even more harmful beliefs where it's like, Black people don't feel as much pain because their skin is thicker. Like we've only recently gone over that
Right.
from like the 1960s. Like you can be a doctor and be wrong. And just because you're around other wrong doctors doesn't make your wrong opinions right.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I think that was like more or less the end of the argument. John Richards, what do you think?
Well, on the subject of Darwin, at that time, about 160 or 165 years ago, his ideas, his understanding of evolution by natural selection were quickly adopted, at least in this country. And
That's so great.
it was only in 1910 America or thereabouts that the evangelicals got hold of it and started to bring up this anti-evolution movement.
Right. I applaud England for a lot of things, and so
Especially their use of Macs.
Yeah, exactly. American products are so great, aren't they? But I'm also saying, like, you can easily find 400 doctors in America who would all disagree that evolution is an actual thing, science teachers included.
Yeah,
that doesn't make it wrong. It's not an argument by ad popularum. It is it's a higher standard of argument and methodology that we apply, determining things in reality for it. Not just, well, a group of people disagree that it's wrong, therefore it's not true. I wish my friend would think about these things. Go on, John Richards.
How many people's opinions make a fact?
How many people's opinions make a fact? How many people does it take to say the same story over and over again to make it a fact?
The answer is an infinite number.
Yeah.
Go on, Larry.
No, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to sit down and discuss all this with him. And I know how well you do it with your street epistemology or scientific Socratic examination.
I appreciate
it. Good on you, mate, as it were.
Man.
I understand we have some listener comments you want to get to before the end of the show.
Good point. We'll start with on the show. Dred, what do you got?
Well, I was just going to say there's a very good interview with Peter Boghossian. He is interviewed on Lawrence Krauss's podcast. So it's definitely something worth checking out. And it was just this week that he did it. It's his Origins podcast. That's the one with Lawrence Krauss, and he does an hour and a half with Peter Boghossian.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you can hear it for free, but you've got to pay to see it.
Right.
So we got a listener comment from our Reddit chat that's open. Thank you guys so much for leaving comments. Anonymous says, believers in other gods say the same thing, and they say you're wrong. You can't both be right, but you can both be wrong. And let me just reread that. So believers in other gods say the same thing and say that you're wrong, but you can't both be right, but you can both be wrong. So if you have Hindus who say, listen, my pastor said this, and that's why your God, your Christian Jesus representative is wrong, like, you can't both be right. So how can I, as the outsider, figure out which one of you is right? Because we could live in a world where both of you are incorrect, right? Let's see. Geophagus, regular commenter on the show, says, how do you get to God from that? Telepathy, maybe. But even if it really happened, I don't see the God connection.
Right.
Right? You can
More
have
like
a God.
radio waves.
Right.
Did you say the name Geophagus?
Yes.
Eat dirt?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's an awesome name.
Okay. A crew one says possibly telepathy, but I don't see any theological reason. A lot of the comments seem to be based on this. And the reason why I bring that up is you could talk, that pastor could have been a time traveler. He could have been a magical man. He could have been from the future. He could have been a sorcerer.
An alien.
He could have been an alien using high-tech technology. He could have been an inventor in his room who figured out some way to read minds over in his basement and never
Could have been
he didn't want to
Peter
disclose
Popov in disguise.
Of course. And he could have just been a guy trying to fool you with some clever,
Right.
trickery, right?
Uh-huh.
All of those cases, the time traveler, the sorcerer, the guy who's just trying to trick you, the magical inventor, the high-tech guy, all of those people are far more likely because they are far more of a mundane explanation than a God existing.
They're natural. Yeah.
Right, which is without a doubt the most complex card you could play in terms of trying to solve a mystery. And in my head, it's always extraordinary expectations require, or what's the, Dred, you want to help me out here?
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Right. And mundane claims require mundane evidence. So like in my head, I raise my expectations for evidence based on how mundane or extraordinary the claim is. Yeah. And if someone says it's just a guy trying to trick you with some radio earwaves, I can believe that because I know radio earwaves exist and people try to trick you. You don't have to like reinvent the wheel. But if you told me that a time traveler was it, my expectations are higher. But at least show me that time travel is a thing, and I might come to terms with you believing that it's just a piece of science at the end of the day, and we'd adopt it as a thing that we teach in schools eventually, maybe. But if you told me that it was like a magical dragon that lived on Jupiter, I'd be like, I need so much more evidence. And yet a God is greater than all those other previous explanations. And you believed it because it was written in a book, that just some people wrote it in a book and you believe it because of that? I need far more evidence than that. Right. Why do you give God the God that's in the Bible, Jesus Christ and his retelling of events, the easy path to believing when we could bring Jesus here in the present and we can interview him afterwards after seeing him heal a person's arm from de novo back to on? Why wouldn't you believe that then, but you'll believe it because it's in a book? Right. A book that you already agree has wrong stories in it. Yeah. Dred, go on ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I invoke Christopher Hitchens, the Hitchens razor, which is that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Sure. Larry, I see. I agree. Yeah. Larry, what do you think?
No, it says there's an answer to it. He says whether it's radio waves or earbuds or aliens or whatever, there's an answer. But invoking God brings up so many more questions. It's not an answer. It's like, where did God come from? Does he have a family? Is he an alien or is he a programmer?
How many gods are there? How did you stop at one?
Right. Even in the Bible, he says we when he's referring to God. So, I mean, it's not, and which God? I mean, humans have worshipped thousands of gods in the history of humanity. But he just jumps from, unexplained to that particular God. Yeah.
The most bizarre rule that God gave was not, hey, there's no other gods. I'm just the only one. It's don't worship any other God except for me. And I'm like, what does that mean?
What other gods?
What other gods?
So there are other gods, are there? You would really?
Yeah. Even in Genesis, they said if they eat of the tree of life, they will become like us.
Oh man!
Like gods. What do you mean by us?
Yeah.
Give me some of that fruit.
Centuries before the
and are any of them made out of pasta? Zantra 3000 says you shouldn't have these conversations. They're delusional. No matter what you say, it isn't going to change their mind. And then Anonymous replied, which is all perfectly fine until they start trying to change the laws to conform to their delusion.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. That's why we speak.
And arresting people for breaking those laws.
Correct. Or changing our culture, right?
Or preventing people from expressing themselves in the way that they is consistent with their beliefs, like me.
And listen, I'm also going to
Mhm.
throw this out too. I'm just going to say it flatly. I'm a much better scientist when I let go of my dogma, because it affected I didn't have to have these two parts of minds brought to work every day. Like I could just bring one mindset to work, get work done, and then come home and live by the same mindset where I appreciate evidential evidence and be willing to say I don't know when I don't know stuff. I've broken far less things due to an understanding that confidence isn't the best way to approach a situation, and kept my employees far safer when I realized that doubt and questions and doing analysis before you do new stuff is far better than just praying at the beginning of the morning and expecting God to take care of me for the rest of the day. I value my critical thinking skills, and anything that would inhibit that in my head is a detraction to my ability to be a good scientist. And so when I see a brilliant Christian scientist like my friend, I say to myself, he could have been better if he'd be willing to be more honest with himself.
Right.
Because
Well,
the world is less without that.
Yeah.
As a
What
result.
what you've said there is you don't want two magisteria, as Stephen Jay Gould called them.
Right.
He thought they didn't overlap. He thought you could have
Non-overlapping magisteria.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And in the podcast that Dred has just drawn our attention to, Lawrence is talking, and he says, for him, there's only one type of fact, and it's obtained by scientific method. That knowledge can only be obtained by scientific method. There's no other way of getting reliable knowledge. Now, that's quite a firm and extreme view, if you like, but it's very difficult to challenge it.
Right.
Hey, we got a shout out from a fellow Pastafarian. Ken Kanobi says, shout out to Dread, the Satanic Temple, wow, and Spaghetti Monster people get ridiculous. I'm sorry, I'm just chopping this up. The Satanic Temple and Spaghetti Monster believers get ridiculed by Christians, but at least we stand for real things and understand the nature of our beliefs' origins. Christianity has no concept. And then the next one was branching off the idea that everything's fine until the laws begin to change our society, which is why religious delusions ought to be recognized as a form of mental illness. If somebody started talking about how magical fairy smurfs were doing all sorts of stuff in their lives, good or evil, and acting out on those fantasies or delusions, we'd recognize it as a mental illness and potentially force them to seek treatment. Yet when people do the same thing with established religious delusions, we treat such actions with legitimacy and even allow those individuals to steer our society.
And in fact, we do worse than that. Most people steer clear of it. They attribute it to some other cause and try to steer clear of any religiosity aspect to it.
Right. Like, imagine how many diseases we could solve if we didn't think diseases were things that are mandated by a supernatural God, or to get rid of them, we could do it by prayer. If everyone was actively working on like a secular scientific approach to resolve things like disease, inequalities, prejudices that we have against each other, origin of life, origin of like where things come from, answering bigger questions that we often give to metaphysical answer or proponents. How much better of a society could we be if we just gave us 1 year off from the dogma and let us actually think about these things in the best method that's gotten us all the other great forms of technology that we can enjoy and appreciate today? It'd be an amazing thing, or at least recognize when we don't know certain things.
Yeah. Before that happens, before everybody starts to think critically, Dred, I'd like to suggest that we set up a company and start producing packets with supernatural noodles written on them.
I love it. Yeah. Spiritual ramen.
Yeah. We could make a
Yeah. I'm in it. Yeah,
Great.
let's do it.
Hey, the Pastafarian is also from Canada. Maybe we can give you, feel free to give me your context. He said, religion is the cause of so much pain and death all over the world. It affects many parts of our lives, and the idea that God is imposed on us. God is on money, and American money, for example. I'm a teacher, and for years I had to listen to the Lord's prayers. For 30 years, I lived in the U.S. and I sang the national anthem, which has God in it. But in Canada, I don't care what people believe as long as it doesn't hurt someone, and we don't spend public money on it. As in the Catholic school system supported by provincial government, but the government doesn't support other religious schools. It
Right,
might
well-
force people to really look at their beliefs and systems. So is Catholic school a thing in Canada?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And various forms of Christianity. Also, there are Muslim schools, so it's not just Christian schools. Of course, Muslim is an Abrahamic religion anyway, but yeah, get that guy's contact for me, and I'd love to hook him into my into our local Pastafarian circle.
Hell yeah. Okay.
Of course, God being on your money, that only began in 1955.
Yeah,
Up-
I
On the
thought it was
paper,
before, but
on the paper money, it was on our coins, like from the Civil War.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But what's really bad is that it's now the official motto of the country.
Yes.
So it can be placed anywhere with impunity.
Yeah.
Larry, I got a shout out to you specifically. This is from Chimuela, who says, everyone needs to consider who they're talking to first. At least in South America, would you dare tell a family living in extreme poverty, specifically women working in horrible conditions and surviving daily physical abuse or sexual assault? Some people just need to believe in fairy tales in order to not kill themselves. As long as they keep religion out of politics, education, and healthcare, we shouldn't care at all. Otherwise, we are just as bad as them trying to convert them into atheism. It's sad, but it's true. Unless, I guess, they themselves start the argument and push into a debate, or
No.
are privileged people. What do
No,
you
I
think?
disagree, because I believe
do
it's, religion is keeping them in that position, because
Yep.
they think that if they just endure through this life, they'll have a paradise in the next, instead of trying to work right now to alleviate the situation that they're in, either by moving to a place where they can get the respect and the work that they need, or making any other kind of change in their life. They're just hunkering down, believing in the next life, and being used by the society.
yeah. And further to that, there is no instance where religion has not infiltrated politics and other aspects of society. So to say that as long as it doesn't,
Right.
it should be okay. There is
Right.
not an instance where it doesn't. So
Right.
it's a non sequitur.
Right. I'm reminded of that film that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where a guy was an alcoholic and he didn't know what to do, and so someone gave him the Bible, and then all of a sudden that solved his alcoholism. And I'm like, all they did was replace one crutch for another, except one was chemical and the other one was completely imaginary and based on false hope. And I'm like, they're both bad. There's ways to get rid of both. You don't have to constantly
Right.
nicotine your patch away from like a bad belief. You could just stop having bad beliefs and bad habits. And
but
there's
you-
good particular options for you to get you
But the
out.
thing about it is, again, belief is not a choice. You believe things you're convinced are true.
True.
And you can't, it's just like, you can't just say, I'm going to believe in Santa Claus this evening
No, you're
and
right.
believe it. You can say it, but you can't believe it. You need to work to find out what is true. You actually need to put in the study and ask the questions and pursue the answers.
Yeah, you need to have an
And-
appreciation for critical thinking. Go on.
Right.
Well, that you make a very good point there, because people who claim to be born again can't be, right? It is a progression of belief, or a progression
Right.
of things that are
It's more of a
starting to change your mind
it's more of a
until the
commitment.
point you say you're born again.
Yeah.
But it's not like the light that struck you like Paul
No.
or Saul. It's not a flash of lightning. It doesn't happen that way. And I think that's a really good point, is that we don't come to our beliefs instantly, and nor can we divest ourselves of them instantly. It's a process.
Right.
Interestingly, of course, Cassius Clay was born again when he became Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali, yeah.
Oh,
Well, again, born again doesn't mean that you changed your belief. It means that you changed your commitment to the belief.
Right.
You can make a decision to be more committed, and that's what that is. I mean, but you already have the belief before you make that commitment.
guys.
Exactly. It's like someone becoming or coming out as an atheist.
Right.
It didn't happen just like that. And the time you told your parents or your friends that you never call yourself a born again atheist, but when you come out, it's a sudden change for everyone else.
Right.
But for you, it's been a long transition
Right.
through examination and all the rest of it.
Takes
So,
months, if not
Right.
years.
And here's my little caveat. I don't believe religion is a mental illness. I believe it in the same sense that someone just saw a magic trick and was convinced because of how it was presented in the audience they were in that it was a real thing. But if they were given an opportunity to understand the mechanics of like how things operate and appreciate it and be willing to let go of the need to believe that the magical trick was a true thing, they would realize these people who are around me were incorrect when they were telling me that they had a good reason to believe this, because now I have a higher appreciation for understanding real things versus not real things. And so it's just a person who's been fooled. And that's not necessarily a mental illness, but there's a way to fool yourself that in my head I find just as dangerous as an illness that could be prescribed to you. And so I'm sorry, what was your name again? Chamela said again, as a response to Larry, you guys were sounded like you were calling religion a mental illness. Well, according to an article I just read, 84%, stats might have changed by now, of the world's population believes in some religion. Are you saying 84% of the population is mentally ill? How about people that believe in ghosts or local myths and legends? Are they mentally ill too?
Do they make laws?
John Richards, do you have a comment on that?
Well,
I certainly.
I could do a debate against Larry on this, because I think that belief is a choice, and it would be an interesting to and fro. We ought to have
Probably
this.
just how you define it. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I'd love to be in on that one.
Yeah, we're running close on time. We probably should.
Yeah, we are. Thank you guys so much for all these comments. Wow, I really, really love this. This is a great discussion.
Yeah,
guys, let's wrap up then. Basically, I felt a little frustrated after talking to my Christian friend, but I also realized that it's a good thing to speak up when things like this happen, because it's only by being quiet do I foster an environment where this kind of Christian Scientist cognitive dissonance is seen as okay. And if I can have these reasonable conversations with someone without making it crazy or argumentative and still be friends afterwards, I can at least present the idea of I'm someone you can talk to if you do feel like some things don't add up, because I can be an objective third party that's not part of your religious sect that can tell you if I'm convinced by the reasoning that you're presenting. I want to be that for Hindus. I want to be that for Buddhism, Christians, everyone else, even Pastafarians to some extent. I just feel like it's good for us to be able to rationalize our ideas with each other, so that the best ones float to the top and the worst ones sink and go away forever. And in the same way how Dred's bringing up these arguments to his board and his political groups, I think we should be willing to do so at least on one-on-one conversations with people, because that's how we can change our culture on a one-by-one basis. John, what do you got? Well,
I've got lots of stuff on Freethought channel.
You sure do.
More stuff added every day almost, and a lovely global atheist news review coming up in a few hours time. And I hope that you two guys, Ty and Dred, are going to be in it. Frank sent his apologies. He's driving back from his army reunion, and Scott can't join us again. He's still on holiday in California, but Tercia will be with us, and I think Guy and some other people. So we'll have a good panel of opinionated people, and we'll deal with our views of the news.
And one day that boat will go to the other side of the screen. We can cross your fingers and pray for it. It'll be a miraculous event of healing. Dred, what do you got for us?
Well, of course, I stream this live at 7 a.m. on Sunday mornings at my channel, Mind Pirate, YouTube channel, Mind Pirate, MINDPYRATE. I've also been doing some Friday invocations and benedictions for our Pastafarian friends. So come on board, check it out. If you like, please subscribe. Love to see you.
Chamela, you're making some very, very good points that we may want to make into future episodes of the show. She just
maybe encourage that person to come on as a guest.
Yeah, she just analogized, or if that's a word, people believe in science in the same way that people believe in faith and gods, because They're just believing in the scientists, and they don't have necessarily a background in the science to appreciate the details. They're just believing smart people. Is that any different than pastors or priests? I love it. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next
We
episode.
ought to. Yes, that's an appeal to authority, and I don't.
That's a
agree.
very good one. I'm just going to copy it here and leave it up to Larry. Larry, why don't you take us out?
Yes, my contact can be found at digitalfreethought.com. If you go there, be sure to click on the blog button for the radio show archives, atheist songs, and many articles on the subject of atheism. One of the things I'd like to say to Camilla is that, sure, 80% of the world believes in God, but it's not the same God, and religious wars are a huge problem.
Yeah.
Remember,
All those gods are mutually exclusive.
right. Remember, everybody is going to somebody else's hell. The time to worry about it is when they prove that heavens and hells and souls are real. Until then, don't sweat it. Enjoy your life, and we'll see you next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock on WOZO Radio. Say bye, everybody.
Bye-bye,
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.